Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from Knocked Loose, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. Alright, it's been a while since someone has thrown some mainstream adjacent metalcore on my Patreon docket. I have long been on the record that it's rarely my thing. The production and the chugging riffs tend to cause a lot of it to run together. It's just not a genre that tends to stick well for me melodically. But Knocked Loose has been stacking up the critical acclaim in recent years, that being the rare band that's only getting heavier with more fans and crossover, even treading near deathcore, especially in some of the vocals. So I did my deep dive to get familiar, and while I quickly realized they weren't really my thing and the sound could feel kind of one note, their 2016 album Laugh Tracks, it was visceral and chunky. I at least grasped the appeal. I wasn't nearly as impressed by their 2019 sophomore album, which felt a little overly clean for my taste, especially with the drums, but some of the atmospheric tricks, they kind of worked on their 2021 EP, and since this album ran less than a half hour, I figured I would give it a proper shot, and this is one of those cases where it's still not really my thing, perhaps even less so given some of the production choices, but if you're in the scene for an album like this, the rebuttal to everything I'm going to say is, well, it's supposed to be like this, what do you expect? And I'm not sure I would have an easy response. The biggest change comes from switching from Will Putney to Drew Fulk on production, and he's been responsible for producing a lot of the radio-ready crossover metalcore, so I guess we now have an answer how Knocked Loose got there. And from there we actually get a couple expected shifts. The compression has been cranked even higher, where the drums sound increasingly quantized and clanking. The bass lines are given even less definition and room to breathe. The guitar tones are like these overloud chunks of distortion to produce even sharper contrast with any atmospheric flourishes. And for Brian Garris' screamed vocals to sound even more shrill and squawking than ever. All of which can feel like explainable choices if you're looking to deliver the most crushing riffs possible while helping the vocals maybe punch through compared to the suffocating burly swells of Laugh Tracks. But you know what, while that album might have run together a little bit, at least seemed to flatter their strengths a bit more effectively for a meatier sound, especially in the low end for the grooves. And even then, most of these tracks I find most distinctive based off of something that's outside of the breakdowns, like say Poppy's visceral screaming on Suffocate, or the ominous chugging riffs of The Calm That Keeps You Awake, or the creeping, rattling dread of Take Me Home, even if I will say I think the Over Three Hills sample was a little bit gimmicky for the horror payoff. Hell, there were hints of a more interesting, warped melodic riff within Blinding Faith, of which I wanted to hear more, but they kept fading away from it. But sometimes there is some distinctive writing, which outside of the relentlessly downbeat themes of existential angst and alienation and pain, you get moments like the vindictive, bassy venom across the tempo shifts of Don't Reach For Me, or the anti-capitalist rage of Slaughterhouse 2 with Motionless in White, where the question of dealing with loss on the closing track Sit and Mourn, it eventually hits the bleakest possible conclusion, where the album title winds up feeling more like a curse than a reassurance. This project ends on a very dark note. But as a whole, you know what, I can't deny if you've got an ear for this sound, especially the stuff that tilts more towards the mainstream, it's gonna be up your alley. It is not that for me, and even by the standards of the hardcore I like that build some of those filthier riffs and breakdowns, a little too clean. I don't expect I'll revisit this that often, but that is on me. I know in the right lane, it's gonna be effective. The fans, they've probably already heard it. If you haven't, it is a pretty short, punishing listen. I think it's worth a shot. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, and subscribe. I know I don't normally go and cover metalcore, but this did show up on my docket on Patreon, and I've gotten a lot of requests that have fallen in and around this lane, and the album was getting a ton of critical acclaim from folks I respect. I figured it was worth a shot. It doesn't really work for me. Honestly, I think the lane of hardcore / metalcore that I like is extremely narrow, but it is what it is. There are some genres, it's just like that for me, and I'd rather be honest and upfront about it. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved in helping support the channel, get albums on my schedule, or hell, just yell at me in my Discord, link to my Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times, I understand, but the option is available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.